Hi everyone, welcome back to So Renew Fashion. Today I have a very exciting new pattern for you guys. It's my most used pattern, linked below, and it is my linen pants and boxer short sewing pattern. So you can make pants or shorts with this, and it has an optional fly to give it a boxer short look. The pants and shorts have basically the same steps, so I'm going to go through each of them together. And the fly is optional, so you can choose if you want to have it in your pants or shorts. But for this tutorial, I'm going to show you the pants with no fly and the shorts with the fly so that you can see how to do both. These pants are high-waisted, but you can roll the waistband so that you can get a mid to low rise look without seeing any exposed seams. I love these pants because they're comfortable like sweatpants, but they look way more fashionable. I'm so obsessed with this pattern, so let's get into the tutorial and download the pattern below. I start by rolling out my fabric to cut out my pattern pieces, and for this pant, I do not want to have a fly, so I fold along the continued line to remove the fly without permanently cutting it off the pattern pieces so that I can cut out the front, back, and pocket pieces. For the shorts, I want to have a fly, so I unfold it and I mark the shorts line with a fabric marker on either side so that I do not have to cut my pattern. And I use a ruler to cut a straight line for the shorts using the two marks that I made. Once I have my pattern pieces cut out, I pin the front and back crotch seams together with the right sides of the fabric facing each other. I like to start pinning at the two ends and any corners, then pin in between to ensure that my pieces are lined up properly. Now sew the front and back crotch seams together with a straight stitch at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. A tip for sewing the fly in any sharp corners is to hand crank your needle into the fabric, then lift your presser foot, then shift your fabric to change the direction that you're sewing in. This can help on sharp curves as well if you struggle to sew curved edges. I now serge the raw edges of my crotch seams, making sure to not serge over the stitches that I made, but beside them. If you don't have a serger, you can do a zigzag stitch or use pinking shears to stop the fabric from fraying. Now we need to create the fake fly if you choose to do so. For this, I like to lay my front pieces right sides together with the fly on the left side. I use my ruler and tailor's chalk to mark a line extending from the crotch seam up to the fly, making sure to keep the width from the fly edge the same all the way up. Now pin along the line that you drew. Flip the front pieces so that the fly is on the right side now, and open the front pieces so that the right sides are facing you and the fly is underneath the right side. The pins will keep the fly from unfolding, and I like to flatten out my front pieces. I now pin the top of the front right side to the fly underneath to keep it in place. I flip the pieces around and take out the bottom pin closest to the crotch to ensure I don't sew over it in the next part. I like to iron the center fold of the fly flat before doing the classic boxer fly stitching. You can mark where you want the stitching to go with tailor's chalk if it makes it easier, but I like to feel the bulky edge of the fly underneath the fabric and try to sew along that edge, following the curve of the fly. I like to stitch on the right side of the fabric because I find I get a nicer curve doing this, but you could sew the fly to the front from the back side if you're struggling to follow the fly curve. I end my seam where the two front pieces meet in the center and make sure to backstitch. I like to do another row of stitching just about a 1/4 inch inside of the first line that I made, keeping it aligned with the exact curve. I sew the top of the fly to the shorts to make later steps easier, and I remove all the pins. To add the pockets, first unfold your pieces so the right sides are facing up. I grab my pattern piece and cut a line along the pocket placement line that matches my size. I line up my pattern piece with the fabric and fold back the pattern at the line I cut. Mark along the cut line with tailor's chalk or a fabric marker, and you want to place your pocket on your pants with the right sides together and the top of the pocket aligned with the line that you mark. Pin along the edge of the pocket to keep it in place, and repeat for both the front and the back sides. Sew along the edge of the pocket with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I then serge the edge of where the pockets are attached to the pants, but not the entire pants. I press the seam allowance toward the pocket side with an iron. I like to press and top stitch the seam allowance towards the pocket to keep the pockets from wanting to stick out of your pants. Sew a straight line down the pocket on the right side of the fabric, making sure the seam allowance is caught underneath. This creates a more professional and functional pocket. Now we want to put the front and the back pieces together and align the side seams. I like to start by pinning the top of the pants and pocket, and then the bottom of the pocket and the bottom of the pants to make sure the most important parts are aligned, and then I pin all in between. I like to start with the top and bottom of the pockets to ensure that my pockets are aligned properly and won't look wonky from the outside. Do this on both sides. Now sew down the sides with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure to pivot at any corners or difficult curves. I sometimes like to do a backstitch at the top and bottom of the pockets to add a bit of stability, but this is optional. Now I pin the front and the back of the crotch right sides together, starting by matching up the crotch seam first and pinning, then pinning the two ends together, and then aligning and pinning the legs in between. My pattern pieces have a weird kind of triangle shape at the bottom hem. Don't worry, this is to prevent bulk and help with folding the hem. It's kind of hard to explain, and I forgot to cut the little triangle bit in the shorts, but just try not to accidentally cut it off if you choose to do the shorts. Now sew the crotch seam together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now serge the side seams and the crotch seams to prevent them from fraying. Serging the corners can be a bit difficult, so it helps to practice and fold the fabric at corners to get a continuous serge seam. This is an optional step, but if you choose not to do the fly, it can be hard to differentiate the front from the back. I choose to cut a 1 inch wide strip of fabric and fold it into a small strap by ironing and pinning. I sew the strap along the edge and will use it later. For the elastic, measure and cut to the indicated size. My elastic is very stretchy, so I chose the smaller size in the given range in the pattern. I gave a range because some elastic have more or less stretch than others do, so it may be best to just measure your elastic around your waist if you're not sure. Sew the ends of the elastic together by overlapping them slightly and sewing a zigzag stitch up and down the overlapping edges. Fold your elastic in half at the sewn edge and mark the folded edge opposite to it. Then fold your elastic to align the sewn and marked edges in the center and mark the folded edges on each side. This evenly marks the front and side seams. Align the sewn part of the elastic with the back center seam and pin it in place. Match up your chalk marks with the side seams and the front seam of the waist and pin these parts together. Make sure you pin your elastic to the right side of the fabric, aligning it with the waist seam. If you have a fly, match up the marking with the folded edge of the fly, as this is your center front. I like to do a small stitch at each of the 4 markings to keep the elastic waistband even and in place. Then, starting from the center back, I sew the elastic to the top of the waistband by holding and pulling the marked sections to stretch the elastic to match up with the waist seam evenly. Sew the elastic to the fabric with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure to constantly and evenly stretch the elastic so that it is lined up with the edge of the fabric. This part can be difficult, but make sure that you're pulling the elastic behind the sewing machine and not only pulling the front part while you're sewing. This part is optional because the seam will be hidden, but I like to serge along the elastic, making sure I'm stretching the elastic while I do so. Now you want to flip the elastic up and away from the fabric and top stitch the fabric to the seam allowance underneath, making sure to stretch the elastic while you sew. This makes finishing the waistband easier. Now you want to roll the elastic down twice inside the pants so that you don't see any elastic and pin it down, making sure to align the seam on the elastic with your pants. I do this at each 4 seams, the front, back, and side seams, and at the 2 side seams, I push the seam allowance towards the front of the pants so that the pockets will naturally want to point forwards towards the front and not slip towards the back. Now we want to sew the waistband down. This is when you'll insert one of the ends of your strap under your waistband right after your back seam if you choose to do so. Sew down the edge of the waistband on the inside about 3/4 of an inch from the top of your waistband. Make sure to evenly stretch your waistband and frequently adjust it to make sure that the fabric is laying flat. When you get near the back seam again, loop the other end of your strap under the waistband before finishing your seam. This marks the back of the pants and provides a loop if you want to hang up your pants, but also indicates which side is the back. If you struggle to sew the waistband, you can also pin the elastic down evenly between the 4 seams. You just want to make sure that your elastic is stretched evenly throughout the whole waistband. I would urge you to try on your pants or shorts now to check the length before we do a 2-inch hem. The pants should be full length and the shorts will have a 2 3/4 inch inseam. You can add more rows of stitching to your elastic if you want to go for a different look. For both the shorts and the pants, I like to measure and fold the bottom hem up 2 inches and then press it with an iron. Do this along the entire hem for both leg holes. You can now unfold this and then fold up the hem up to the crease to get a 1-inch hem and press this. This is my quick and easy way to get a 1-inch hem. You can now fold the hem 1 inch twice and pin it in place. I like to top stitch my hems, so I pin on the right side of the fabric. Now sew the hem down with about 3/4 of an inch seam allowance and you're finished your pants or shorts. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you like this tutorial as much as I do, and please show me if you make this pattern. Don't forget the pattern is linked below, and comment what you want to see next. Bye!